The skies over Varelia were no longer blue. Once calm and full of drifting crystal clouds, they now burned with fire as warships pierced the atmosphere like falling stars. High above the surface, aboard the Valari Confederation's last remaining orbital station, High Scholar Ellery Morn stood silently at the observation window, his golden robes dim in the flickering emergency lights. He had never trained for war. None of them had. For generations, the Valari had embraced peace, art, and science, believing their diplomacy and intelligence would shield them from the violence of the galaxy. But the Draxian horde had no use for reason. They were not a species of talk, they were predators. When their dark ships had first appeared at the edge of the system, Valari diplomats had reached out, offering treaties, knowledge, even resources. The Draxian answered with silence, then fire. In less than a week, 3 Valari worlds had gone dark, their cities erased from orbit. Ellery had watched recordings of Draxian landing ships deploying machines that tore into the soil and consumed everything: forests, oceans, entire populations. He couldn't understand such hunger for destruction, and yet here it was, now burning in the skies of his own homeworld. Behind him, technicians worked frantically to power the last communication buoy. They had sent dozens of distress calls already to trade partners, to ancient neighbors, even to unknown space. No answer had come. "One more signal," Ellery whispered, barely audible, as if he were speaking to the stars themselves. "Someone, anyone, one, please hear us." The technician nodded, teeth clenched as she initiated the final transmission. The signal was encoded with everything they could offer: coordinates, language protocols, biological data, and a simple, desperate message: "We are under attack. We cannot survive alone. If you can hear us, please help." As the buoy launched and disappeared into the void, the station shook violently. A Draxian cruiser had spotted them. Red warning glyphs lit the chamber, and Ellery could hear distant metal groans as the outer hull was breached. He didn't run. There was nowhere left to go. Instead, he turned back to the viewport, watching his world slowly fall into chaos below. Across the sky, thousands of tiny escape craft fled the surface like fireflies, but the Draxian hunted them, one by one. Ellery clenched his fists, not in anger, but sorrow. He had dedicated his life to preserving knowledge, to uplifting civilization. And now, as death approached, he realized how fragile all their brilliance was without the strength to defend it. The floor vibrated again, this time sharper, closer. A second blast rocked the station, throwing a technician off balance. "The power core is failing," someone shouted. Ellery walked past them all, moving into the command chamber with calm he didn't truly feel. He stared at the main screen where their last signal pulsed quietly into deep space. It was a foolish hope, perhaps even childish, but it was all they had left. Maybe, somewhere in the darkness, someone still listened. Maybe not every species had turned their back on mercy. Then, with a final blinding flash, the orbital station erupted into flame. The buoy, however, was already gone, riding silent and alone across the void, carrying the voice of a people on the edge of annihilation. And far, far away, in a sector long removed from Valari charts, something old and powerful stirred. A listening post, hidden in the black of space, blinked to life. The signal had been received. The message had been heard. And buried deep within the steel heart of a massive warship, ancient engines hummed as a human voice broke the silence, coordinates locked. "Prepare to jump." Light years away from the dying world of Varelia, aboard the colossal human warship UHS Resolute, Captain Morgan Hale stood in the center of the command bridge, his eyes locked on the flickering screen displaying the faint distress signal. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, massive, imposing, and armed to the teeth with weapons capable of turning entire fleets to ash. The call for help was unlike anything they had seen before, a peaceful race begging for rescue against an enemy that devoured worlds. Morgan's jaw tightened as he listened to the automated replay of the Valari message, each word filled with fear, hope, and desperation. For years, humanity had been spreading out into the stars, encountering new species and sometimes clashing, but they had never been the ones to answer a call like this. This was different. There was no hesitation in Morgan's voice when he gave the order. Set course for the Valeri system at maximum speed. Prepare weapons and shields. We don't know what we'll find, but we'll give no quarter. The crew, trained to handle the worst of the worst, worked swiftly. The massive engines of the Resolute hummed louder, ready to jump through the fabric of space toward a system that had already seen too much death. As the ship entered the system, the bridge was filled with data, burning cities on Varelia, scattered debris from destroyed satellites, and the unmistakable signatures of Draxian warships circling like vultures. The tension was thick. Morgan's second-in-command, Lieutenant Rise, pointed to the main screen. "Enemy fleet is already in orbit, Captain. They outnumber us at least 3-1. A grim silence fell over the bridge, but Morgan didn't flinch. That just means they don't know who they're dealing with. The Resolute unleashed a warning broadcast across all channels in the ancient galactic standard language. This is the United Human Space Fleet. Cease your attack on Varelia immediately, or face total destruction. For a moment, the only response was static. Then, plasma bolts tore through the void, aimed directly at the massive human ship. The battle had begun. The Resolute's defenses flared as energy shields absorbed the initial strikes and automated turrets responded with rapid, precise fire. Human pilots scrambled in fighter craft, weaving through enemy fire to strike at the Draxian cruisers. On the surface below, Valeri citizens watched from their shelters, their eyes wide with disbelief and cautious hope. They had never seen such power, such speed, or such unyielding strength before. From the command station, Ellery Morn's voice cracked over the emergency channels. Is this what we hoped for?" On the Resolute, Morgan's voice was steady but fierce. "This is what it means to fight for survival." The battle surged back and forth, the Draxian firing relentlessly, their ships agile and brutal, but the humans fought like a force awakened from ancient legends. With calculated strikes, the Resolute disabled one cruiser, then another, its railguns cutting through enemy armor like lightning. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the orbit, lighting the skies with fire and shadow. The Valeri below could only watch as their protectors pushed the invaders back, buying time for evacuation and repair. But Morgan knew this was just the beginning. The Draxian would not retreat easily, and the battle for Varelia's soul was far from over. In the midst of the chaos, an urgent message came through from the Valeri surface. "Our cities are falling. We cannot hold much longer." The captain clenched his fists. "Then we give them hope." Orders were given to prepare for a ground deployment, elite human marines ready to drop from orbit and hold the lines on the planet's surface. The crew moved with practiced precision, knowing their mission was no longer just about defense. It was about turning the tide of a war they had just entered. As the Resolute's massive engines powered up for the final assault, the distant stars beyond seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere in the darkness, the Draxian forces braced for a battle they never expected to lose. And aboard the human warship, Captain Morgan Hale prepared to write the first chapter of a story that would be told for generations, a story where humanity answered the call and refused to let an innocent world fall into darkness. The battle for Varelia had moved from the cold vacuum of space down to the planet's surface, where the desperate fight for survival grew fiercer by the hour. As the UHS Resolute loomed overhead, its shadow stretching across the burning cities below, Captain Morgan Hale watched the screens closely, tracking the drop pods carrying human marines speeding through the atmosphere. Each pod was a promise of steel, fire, and unwavering defense for the Valeri people who had never known war. Commander Elise Brandt led the first wave, her squad ready to land amidst the chaos, to defend the last Valeri strongholds against the relentless Draxian ground forces. The moment their pods slammed into the shattered earth, explosions erupted nearby, and the air filled with the crackle of plasma weapons and the roar of mechanical beasts. The Valeri, fragile and unarmed, watched from their shelters as these new warriors moved with a strange grace, quick, deadly, and fearless. Elise's voice came over the comms, calm but resolute. "Hold your ground. Protect the civilians at all costs. The Draxion may be strong, but they haven't faced us yet." As the battle spread across ruined streets and shattered forests, the Marines fought like a force awakened from a long slumber, their training and discipline cutting through the enemy's savage assaults. Heavy machine guns tore through swarms of Draxian soldiers, while precision snipers took out enemy commanders before they could rally their troops. Drones hovered overhead, providing real-time intelligence and launching small, precise strikes that left no room for the Draxian to regroup. Yet, the enemy was relentless. Their monstrous walkers smashed through barricades, their war cries echoing through the smoke-choked air. The Varelia, despite their fear, began to step out from hiding, offering what aid they could: medical supplies, shelter, and guidance through the treacherous streets. Ellery Morn found himself walking alongside the soldiers, clutching a small data tablet that held centuries of Varelia knowledge and technology. Though untrained for combat, his mind raced to find ways to support the humans, sharing information about hidden tunnels and ancient energy nodes that could be used to turn the tide. At one point, a Draxian war machine cornered a group of Marines near a collapsed building, its heavy guns grinding and sparking. Elise didn't hesitate. With a swift signal, her squad launched grenades, forcing the creature back, then closed in with plasma rifles blazing. The war machine fell in a shower of sparks and smoke, and the Marines moved forward, steady and unstoppable. Meanwhile, Captain Hale coordinated orbital strikes from the Resolute, targeting enemy reinforcements and supply lines with precision. The Valeria's energy shield technology, adapted by human engineers, enhanced the Marines' armor and vehicles, making them nearly invincible in battle. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The Draxian, though brutal, were confused and frustrated by the humans' unexpected tactics and unyielding spirit. In a brief lull, Ellery approached Elise with a question that had weighed on his mind since the fighting began. "Why do you fight so hard? What drives you to risk your lives for strangers?" Elise looked at him, dirt and sweat streaking her face, but her eyes shone with quiet strength. "Because we've known loss. Because we swore never to watch others suffer alone again. We fight for hope, yours and ours." The Varelia listened, inspired by these warriors who had brought fire to their darkest hour. But the war was far from over. Scouts reported that the Draxian were regrouping, preparing for a massive counterattack, bringing in new weapons and merciless commanders. Captain Hale knew they had to strike fast and hard before the enemy could regain strength. Plans were drawn to launch a coordinated assault on the Draxian command center deep within the planet's crust, a fortress rumored to control their forces in the system. The Marines prepared, the Varelia contributed their knowledge, and the Resolute readied its most powerful weapons for orbital support. As night fell on the ravaged world, the distant roars of war machines and the bright flashes of gunfire lit the horizon. Yet in the hearts of those fighting below and those commanding above, a new feeling grew, a feeling that no matter how fierce the enemy, no matter how dark the night, humanity's steel and fire would light the way to victory. They had come to teach the galaxy a lesson, that strength was not just in weapons or numbers, but in courage, unity, and the will to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The story of Varelia was no longer one of desperation. It was the beginning of a war where hope would burn brighter than any star. The battle for Varelia reached a crucial turning point as the combined forces of humanity and the Varelia prepared for a decisive strike against the heart of the Draxian command fleet. Captain Morgan Hale stood on the bridge of the UHS Resolute, his gaze fixed on the glowing strategic maps that displayed the enemy's positions. The Varelia had shared valuable intelligence about the location of the Draxian mothership, a massive carrier orbiting the gas giant at the edge of the system. This ship was the source of the enemy's command and control. Destroy it, and the Draxian forces would be thrown into chaos. As the Resolute's engines hummed in anticipation, Captain Hale gathered his top officers. "We cannot wait for them to come to us. We take the fight to their doorstep." The plan was bold, a simultaneous strike combining orbital bombardment with a ground assault on the command center within the mothership itself. The Varelia engineers and human military strategists worked side by side, adapting technology, merging Valeria's advanced shield systems with the human weapon platforms to create new defenses and weapons. The alliance was not just military, it was a fusion of two cultures learning to trust one another under fire. On the surface of Varelia, Commander Elise Brandt prepared her forces for the ground mission. The elite Marine squads moved through battered cities and forests, their armor reinforced with Varelia energy shields, their weapons upgraded to pierce the Draxians' thick armor. Beside her, Ellery Morn handed over data chips containing layouts of the enemy's underground tunnels and critical weak points. "This knowledge saved many lives before," he said quietly, "and it will again." The air was thick with anticipation and tension. Soldiers double-checked their gear, medics tended to the wounded, and the Varelia civilians watched from hidden shelters, placing their fragile hopes in the hands of these strangers who had come to fight for them. As the day turned to twilight, the UHS Resolute moved into attack position, its engines glowing bright against the dark space backdrop. Suddenly, the Draxian fleet scrambled to respond, deploying their fastest fighters and heavy cruisers. Captain Hale ordered the launch of human fighter squadrons, their sleek ships darting into the enemy lines with precision strikes. The battle was fierce. Explosions rippled through space as energy beams met plasma bolts. The Draxion fighters were brutal, but they lacked the coordinated tactics of the humans and Varelia. Pilots communicated swiftly, adapting to enemy movements and covering each other's backs. Above the gas giant, the massive Draxian mothership loomed, its dark hull bristling with weapons. The Resolute's railguns opened fire, slamming heavy metal projectiles into the carrier's shields. Sparks flew as the shields strained and wavered. Below, Elise's Marines infiltrated the enemy tunnels. The ground was trembling from distant explosions, and every shadow hid potential death. The soldiers moved silently, relying on the Varelia data to avoid traps and ambushes. Their goal was clear: disable the ship's power core and disrupt the command systems. The tension was unbearable as they neared their objective. In one narrow corridor, a squad was ambushed by Draxian soldiers wielding brutal energy blades. The Marines fought back fiercely, their training and courage tested to the limit. Explosions from above shook the tunnels as the Resolute's bombardment intensified. Slowly, the team pushed forward, driven by the hope of ending the nightmare. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the chamber housing the power core. The air was filled with smoke and alarms. The Marines hurried to place charges that would destroy the core. Back on the Resolute, Captain Hale coordinated the final assault, ordering all weapons to focus on the mothership's critical systems. The ship began to tremble violently. Alarms blared as the shields flickered and the hull cracked. The Draxian commanders scrambled, their control systems failing one by one. On the surface, the Varelia and human forces saw their enemies falter. The tide had truly turned. The Draxian retreated in disarray, their ships scattering across the system. The Varelia people emerged from hiding, tears of relief and joy shining in their eyes. For the first time in weeks, the skies over Varelia were quiet. Captain Hale and Commander Brandt stood side by side, watching the aftermath unfold. "This is just the beginning," Hale said, "but we've shown that even the darkest enemy can be beaten when we stand together." Ellery Moore nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful. The alliance between humanity and the Varelia was now forged in fire and blood, a beacon for other worlds that might one day face the same darkness. As the UHS Resolute prepared to leave orbit, the Varelia broadcast their message across the stars, a call for peace, for unity, and a reminder that no species should face annihilation alone. The story of Varelia had changed from one of despair to one of hope, a promise that when humanity answered the call, the galaxy itself could change. The war was over, but the scars on Varelia and its people ran deep. The once vibrant world lay in ruins, its forests scorched, its cities shattered beneath the weight of relentless conflict. Yet amidst the devastation, something new was taking root: hope. Captain Morgan Hale stood once again on the deck of the UHS Resolute as it prepared to depart orbit, looking down on the planet that had become both a battlefield and a symbol of something greater. Beside him, Ellery Morn and Commander Elise Brandt shared a quiet moment of reflection, their faces etched with fatigue but shining with determination. The Varelia, a peaceful race that had never known war, were beginning to rebuild their world with cautious hands, aided by the humans who had risked everything to answer their desperate call. "We came to fight," Morgan said softly, "but what we've created here goes beyond battle. This is a legacy." The Valeri's ancient cities were being restored with human technology and Valeri artistry intertwined. The people worked side by side, sharing knowledge, culture, and stories of survival. Ellery took pride in watching his people learn the ways of defense and strategy from the humans, while teaching them the secrets of healing and energy manipulation that had preserved their civilization for centuries. But the alliance was fragile. Many stars away, new threats stirred in the darkness, those who would see the unity between these two species as a challenge or a weakness to exploit. Captain Hale knew the peace they had forged had to be protected, not just with weapons, but with trust and understanding. The UHS Resolute stayed in orbit longer than planned, serving as both guardian and symbol of the new era. Marines and diplomats worked together, setting up training programs for Valeri defenders and sharing intelligence on possible enemy movements. The message was clear: the galaxy was vast and dangerous, but together they were stronger. One night, as Morgan walked the quiet corridors of the ship, he was joined by Elise. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked quietly. He looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of countless battles behind them and unknown challenges ahead. "No. But we've started something important. Something worth fighting for." Meanwhile, on Varelia's surface, the Valeri held a ceremony to honor the fallen and celebrate survival. Ellery spoke to the gathered crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We were once a people isolated and fragile. Now we stand united with humanity. Together, we face the future not as separate species, but as allies, friends, and protectors of all life." The crowd erupted in cheers, their hope rekindled by the promise of unity. But even as the celebrations continued, shadows lurked beyond the light. Scouts reported signs of movement in distant star systems, mysterious fleets gathering, their intentions unknown. The war might have ended here, but the universe was far from safe. In a quiet room aboard the Resolute, Captain Hale reviewed the latest reports. The peace was fragile, and the cost of failure was unthinkable. Yet, he believed in the strength of the alliance they had built. The fire that had once been a weapon of destruction was now the spark of a new beginning, a legacy of unity born from the darkest times. The story of Varelia and humanity's role in its salvation would echo through the stars, a reminder that even in the face of annihilation, hope and courage could light the way. As the UHS Resolute set course for its next mission, carrying ambassadors and soldiers alike, the legacy of fire and unity burned brightly in the hearts of all who had fought, survived, and dared to dream of peace.